It's not always bad to be triggered, because being triggered is often your nervous system doing exactly what it is designed to do: protect you. A trigger is your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention, this feels familiar and it might not be safe. For example, if you see someone raise their voice aggressively, your body might react with a racing heart or muscle tension or a sense of fear, because somewhere in your past, a raised voice means danger. That's your system trying to keep you safe by responding quickly, often faster than conscious thought. And here's the thing, in a world of injustice, violence, and systemic harm, there are times when we should feel triggered. Feeling activated in response to boundary violations like racism, sexism, or abuse is a healthy response. The problem isn't the trigger itself, it's when our nervous system gets stuck there, unable to return to safety once the threat has passed. The goal of nervous system work isn't to never be triggered. It's to build capacity so that we can feel the trigger, process the emotion, and then come back to being centered instead of spiraling into overwhelm or shutting down.
Did you know your nervous system coordinates nearly every function of your body? And most of that happens automatically beneath your conscious awareness. Our past experiences, our trauma, it's not just a memory, it's an ongoing pattern in your nervous system, shaping how you think, feel, how you act today. Welcome to Trauma Rewired, the podcast that teaches you about your nervous system, how trauma lives in the body, and what you can do to heal. Today, we're revisiting the core. How does the nervous system work? What is trauma really? I'm your co-host, Elisabeth Kristof, founder of BrainBase.com, an online community that uses applied neurology and somatics, neurosomatics, to improve brain function and nervous system health, repattern stress responses, and process emotions somatically for growth and behavior change. And I'm the founder of the Neurosomatic Intelligence Certification, an ICF-accredited course for coaches, therapists, and practitioners to equip you with a trauma-sensitive framework, tools, and an education to bring the brain and the nervous system into the good work that you are doing for lasting client change and expanded capacity.
And I'm your co-host, Jennifer Wallace. I'm a neurosomatic psychedelic preparation and integration guide, and I bring your nervous system into your peak somatic experiences so that you can feel safe to receive the experience and embody the messages. I'm also an educator at the Neurosomatic Intelligence Certification. Whether you're new or a longtime listener, this conversation lays the foundation for understanding trauma as an imprint in the body and why nervous system healing matters.
Your nervous system, including your brain, is your body's operating system. It runs everything, even when you're not aware of it. Like the operating system on your phone or your computer, it manages inputs, interprets signals, and generates outputs. The input might be the smell in the air, or the tone of somebody's voice, or even the way the light flickers in the room. The operating system, your nervous system, takes in all that sensory data, compares it against past experiences, and makes a decision, safe or unsafe. And constantly, it's running in the background, adjusting your breathing rate, your heart rate, your digestion, even your emotional state. If it perceives threat, it will create protective outputs like tension, anxiety, hypervigilance, racing heart rate, changes in your respiration, or even dissociation. If it feels safe, it creates a state that allows for connection, creativity, and rest. And here's the thing, your nervous system doesn't just respond to what's happening. It responds to what it predicts might happen based on those inputs. That's why we can find ourselves in a safe room, but still feel unsafe in our bodies. The nervous system is pattern making, predicting, and constantly creating your experience that you live in. The beauty is, like any system, it can be updated and repatterned when you work with it intentionally. That's why understanding how it works, to really know thyself, is the first step to change, to resilience, to a new experience of the world.
So let's dive into learning about the nervous system by breaking it down into some key concepts, starting with the central nervous system, the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. Think of the CNS, your brain and spinal cord, as the command center, the place where all the information is processed, stored, and integrated. It's like the headquarters of your operating system. Then you have the PNS, the vast network of nerves branching out from the spinal cord to every part of your body. your sensory receptors, muscles, and organs. The PNS is like the communication network, carrying messages back and forth between the body and the brain. Input comes in, what you see, what you hear, what you taste and feel. The CNS makes sense of it, and the PNS carries the brain's decision out of the body, out into the body, adjusting your breathing, your heart rate, your muscle tension. It's like a constant feedback loop, information moving in, being interpreted, and creating outputs that shape how you move, how you feel, and how you experience life. Understanding this system is the first step in learning how trauma shapes the body and how we can begin to shift it.
In the peripheral nervous system, that big network of nerves bringing sensory information and carrying out outputs, you have the autonomic and you have the somatic systems. They're two divisions of the peripheral nervous system, both sending information to and from the CNS. They're the communication highways between the brain and spinal cord and the body's organs, tissues, and muscles. Knowing these structures is essential to understanding trauma because dysregulation shows up across multiple layers of the nervous system, not just the autonomic nervous system, even though that is where we see survival responses like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, but also in the somatic nervous system that governs movement and tension, in the central nervous system where trauma is impacting our perception, our memory, and our emotional regulation. Nervous system work helps us repattern these systems so safety isn't just a thought, it's a felt experience in the body. The somatic nervous system is like your body's conscious messenger. It controls voluntary movements like lifting your arm or writing an email. It's the part of your system that you can directly control. The autonomic nervous system, on the other hand, runs in the background. It's managing all the essential processes that keep you alive, like your heartbeat, your digestion, your breathing, your blood pressure, and even how your pupils adjust to light. It's automatic, so you don't have to think about it. And here's the thing. The autonomic nervous system is the part of your body that carries out trauma and stress responses, but it doesn't act alone. It's your brain, especially deep subconscious regions like the brainstem or the amygdala, that constantly interpret your internal and external world, deciding if you're safe or unsafe. Based on those interpretations, your autonomic nervous system generates outputs: racing heart rate, shallow breath, muscle bracing, digestive shutdown. Think of it like your brain is reading the room, and the autonomic nervous system is the team that mobilizes your body based on what it needs. When we talk about healing the nervous system, we're really talking about helping those interpretations shift. So your body no longer reacts as if every sensation or movement is a moment of threat. You begin to experience what safety actually feels like, the ability to rest, to connect, to fully be in your body again. The autonomic nervous system is what creates changes in bodily functions and what most people are referring to when they're talking about nervous system regulation. But it's important to remember that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Our capacity to regulate and modulate depends just as much on the central nervous system, on how the brain interprets that incoming data and makes predictions and directs the body's responses.
That's right. And so let's break down the two main branches of the automatic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Think of the sympathetic system as your internal accelerator. It prepares you to take action, to fight, or to flee in response to a threat. Heart rate increases, breath quickens, muscles tense. Your body gears up for survival. On the other side, the parasympathetic system is like the brake pedal. It slows things down, helping you to rest, to digest, repair, and recover. These systems aren't meant to work in isolation. They're designed to work together, creating a dynamic, responsive system that can adapt to the demands of the moment. The key isn't to always be calm or to always be activated. It's to have modulation, the capacity to move between these states as needed. Trauma disrupts this modulation, often leaving people stuck in high-stress states or survival mode, or conversely, unable to activate when needed, leading to patterns like shutdown, fatigue, or dissociation. It's not about being calm all the time. It's about this modulation, appropriate activation for the situation.
These internal states, whether it's like a surge of sympathetic activation or a deep parasympathetic shutdown, they aren't just invisible background processes. They shape everything about how we experience the world. When our nervous system is in a heightened state of activation, we may interpret a neutral glance or someone's tone as a threat, hear criticism when none was intended, and feel like we need to flee a situation even when we're safe. The state of the body informs the state of the mind. The brain makes sense of the world based on the signals it receives from the body. That means that what we believe about ourselves, how we feel emotionally, the thought loops that are running through our mind, the behaviors that we engage in, and even the habits we build are shaped by the nervous system patterns we're in. If we're stuck in a chronic state of stress or survival, our thoughts, emotions, and our actions will reflect that. These patterns of hypervigilance or overworking or perfectionism or emotional shutdown. And then on the flip side, when we increase our capacity and we have the ability to modulate and feel safe, we unlock the ability to create new thoughts, new beliefs, new behaviors that align with the present moment rather than just our survival strategies.
Think about a time when you were late for work and stuck in traffic. Your heart begins racing, your breath is shallow, maybe your jaw tightens. That's your sympathetic system, the fight or flight response activating to deal with the pressure. Now you get to work. The meeting's over. You're still on edge. You're snapping at a coworker. Your mind is racing and you can't focus. That's your nervous system state shaping your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. On the flip side, imagine sitting in the sun after a long walk, taking deep breaths, feeling relaxed and open. You smile at the person next to you. You feel creative. You feel connected, even grateful. That's your parasympathetic state at work, influencing your beliefs. I'm safe. Your emotions, calm and content. Your thoughts, this is a good day. And your behaviors are reaching out, engaging, and creating. So, the way your body feels, the state of your nervous system directly impacts how you see the world, how you feel, how you think, and how you act. It's the lens through which you experience life.
Our nervous system is how we respond to stress, like the stress of being alive, how we react to the world and take action, how we adapt to stressors. And stress is not the event itself, it's the physiological response your body has to stimulus, whether that's physical or emotional or cognitive or environmental. And stress isn't inherently good or bad. It's simply the body's way of mobilizing resources to meet the perceived challenges or the demands or the changes. And at its core, stress is your nervous system activating to maintain or restore balance, whether that means upregulating into a fight or flight to take action or downregulating into freeze or shut down to protect you when things feel overwhelming, too unpredictable. Stressors are inputs. Everything the nervous system has to process, from a difficult conversation to a loud noise or a light deadline or that subtle feeling of being left out. The brain assesses these inputs, predicts the potential outcomes, and then signals the body to respond. The problem is when the nervous system lacks the capacity to modulate, when it gets stuck in that overactivation or underactivation and it can't come back to a regulated baseline. For example, getting a flat tire on the way to work, that is not the stress, it's the situation. Your body's reaction, your racing heart, your stomach tightening, your looping thoughts of worry, that's the stress response. This is the key distinction because different people can have really different responses to stress, even if it's the same event. What might feel overwhelming to one person might barely register to another, and that's because your stress response is shaped by your nervous system's capacity, is shaped by your past experiences, your current state. So stress is the initial activation, the physiological, emotional, and mental shift that prepares your body to take action. It's the adaptive response designed to help you face challenging situations, but it becomes harmful when it's chronic, when it's unresolved, when it's disproportionate to the situation. If you're a coach, therapist, or practitioner, and you know you want to bring neurosomatic tools and a framework into your work, join us at neurosomatic.com to learn more about our certification course.
And let's talk about triggers. A trigger is any stimulus, internal or external, that reminds your nervous system of a past threat or challenge. Whether you're aware of it or not, it's a cue that your nervous system picks up on and interprets as potentially dangerous based on these past experiences. Triggers can be sensory, like a loud noise, a particular smell, or a facial expression. They can be emotional, like feeling left out or feeling criticized, or even environmental, like entering into a crowded room. They can also arise from internal signals like a racing heart or a tight chest that the brain interprets as a sign that something is wrong. The important thing to remember is that a trigger is not the problem itself. It's the nervous system's interpretation of the input as a possible threat. It's the match that lights the fire, activating a protective response in your body, whether that's a burst of anxiety, a wave of shame, or a shutdown response. Understanding your triggers isn't about blaming yourself or feeling activated. It's about learning how your nervous system has adapted over time to protect you and how you can build capacity and safety so that the same stimuli don't always result in the same overwhelming response. It's not always bad to be triggered because being triggered is often your nervous system doing exactly what it is designed to do: protect you. A trigger is your body's way of saying, hey, pay attention. This feels familiar and it might not be safe. For example, if you see someone raise their voice aggressively, your body might react with a racing heart or muscle tension or a sense of fear because somewhere in your past, a raised voice means danger. That's your system trying to keep you safe by responding quickly, often faster than conscious thought. And here's the thing: in a world of injustice, violence, and systemic harm, there are times when we should feel triggered. Feeling activated in response to boundary violations like racism, sexism, or abuse is a healthy response. The problem isn't the trigger itself, it's when our nervous system gets stuck there, unable to return to safety once the threat has passed. The goal of nervous system work isn't to never be triggered. It's to build capacity so that we can feel the trigger, process the emotion, and then come back to being centered instead of spiraling into overwhelm or shutting down.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes being triggered is actually an invitation it's like a signpost pointing us towards where our system needs care, attention, repatterning. Triggers can illuminate places where we feel overwhelmed, shut down, reactive. They reveal the edge of our capacity, the places where our nervous system perceives threat, even if the current situation is safe. When we approach triggers with curiosity instead of judgment, they become these opportunities to grow our capacity, to teach our nervous system that maybe something that felt dangerous can be navigated safely now. Like, for example, if speaking up in a group triggers anxiety, it's not just a problem to fix, it's a cue that there's a protective pattern here at play. Maybe your system learned a long time ago that using your voice wasn't safe. Triggers show us where to focus your work, where to build the strength and the flexibility to stay present, express yourself, and expand your capacity to handle the intensity of life. So rather than always avoiding triggers, we can see them as indicators, signals of where we can grow or heal or reclaim parts of ourselves that have been locked away in these survival responses.
The stress response is your body's way of mobilizing energy to meet a challenge, and it starts in the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands. The stress response mobilizes energy because it's your body's way of getting you ready to act. When your brain perceives a challenge or a threat, the HPA axis sends a signal to release stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones tell your body to move resources where they're needed most for survival. Here's how it works. Blood flow shifts away from the systems you don't need immediately, like your digestion, and moves it towards your muscles, your heart, your lungs, getting you ready and prepared to run or to fight. Your heart rate increases to pump more oxygen to your tissues. Your breathing quickens to bring in more oxygen. Your muscles tense, ready for action. Your brain sharpens focus, looking for threats and solutions. This is your body's way of saying, hey, we've got to move fast. Let's get all systems online for survival. It's brilliant, and it's exactly what we need in short bursts. But if the system stays turned on for too long, or if we perceive non life threatening events as danger, like emails or traffic or conversations, that constant activation and stress response starts to wear us down. That's why learning how to come down from the stress response is essential for our long term health.
We are not trying to flatline with this work or definitely not emotionally bypass, right? We want to understand the stress response because when we understand the stress response, it shows us that the goal of nervous system work isn't to eliminate stress or to be calm all of the time. It's to build capacity so that we can fully experience the intensity of life without getting stuck in those states. Because we're not trying to flatline and we're also not trying to emotionally bypass because when we don't feel things, when we're numb all of the time, we're likely in a state of dissociation, cut off from our body's signals and not actually processing anything. And that can seem like calm, but it's actually more of a freeze state, a survival strategy. And the true aim of neurosomatic work is to be able to develop the agility to move through emotions and challenges, to feel them fully when they arise, to stay present with the experience, and then coming back down to be able to rest and digest. It's about creating a dynamic range, the ability to rise to the occasion, engage with life, and then re-regulate rather than shutting down or staying stuck in survival patterns. And that's what builds real resilience, the capacity to feel, process, and then to return to safety.
Yeah, regulation has become a bit of a buzzword in wellness spaces, and let's get really clear on what that means. Regulation isn't about always being calm or being relaxed. It's about that modulation that we spoke of earlier, the ability to move between different states of activation that your body really requires. Sympathetic activation, that fight or flight energy, it isn't bad, it's essential. Without it, you couldn't stand up, speak, or even focus on a task. You need sympathetic energy to engage with life. On the other side, the parasympathetic state allows for rest, repair, digestion, and recovery, equally essential for survival and health. True regulation means having the agility to shift between these states appropriately, meeting the demands of the right level of activation, and then coming back down to a place of rest and balance. When we talk about nervous system health, we're talking about this fluidity, not staying calm all the time, but having the capacity to move in and out of activation in a way that keeps us connected, healthy, and present.
Dysregulation happens when the nervous system can't shift out of that heightened state or the shutdown state. It gets stuck in a survival mode, either overactivated, anxious, restless, tense, or underactivated, numb, disconnected, frozen. And here's the key. Dysregulation itself isn't bad. It's actually an appropriate response to certain situations. If you're facing a real threat, like somebody's breaking into your house or there's a car swerving in front of your lane, you should get heightened activation to help you survive and respond to that situation. The problem is when our system can't come back down after the danger has passed, or when we're living in an environment that keeps that danger ever present. That's what trauma does. It creates this recurring response, a protective pattern that gets stuck on repeat. So even after the event is over, you're not broken because you feel stuck. You're stuck because your nervous system is doing what it's been trained to do to protect you. And dysregulation becomes a pattern when it becomes your default state, when it shapes your beliefs, your emotions, your actions in a way that limits your capacity to live fully. The goal of nervous system work is not to never get dysregulated, but it's to build the capacity to come back and feel safe enough again to process the experience and move through life's challenges without staying stuck in the survival loops.
So, what is trauma? Trauma is an imprint in the nervous system. Trauma isn't just the event itself, it's the imprint that lives in the nervous system and the way the body and brain remember and react to a past threat over and over again. Gabor Mate says it so clearly. Trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you. It's the way your system adapts in the moment to keep you alive, and the way those adaptations can become chronic patterns that shape your beliefs, emotions, and behaviors long after the event has passed. Pierre Genet, a pioneering psychologist, described trauma as being stored in the sensations, reflexes, and the automatic reactions, not in the thoughts or memories alone. That means trauma lives in the body, in the muscle tension, breath patterns, posture, and the way we respond to sensory input. It's not just a story in the mind, it's an ongoing physiological response. When we talk about trauma in this work, we're talking about the recurring dysregulation, the body's protective patterns that continue to activate even when the original danger is long gone. That's why nervous system work is so essential. We're not just rethinking the past, we're repatterning the nervous system to respond differently now. Recently I've been giving so much thought to bracing.
Mhm.
And when we've recorded in the past, I've associated the bracing pattern getting so deeply wired into my body because of sexual trauma, because of early childhood sexual abuse, and the idea that the predator lives in the external world and I am bracing against what's happening in the world. But what I've really learned over our time in nervous system health and in my own processing, and particularly with emotions, is that I brace from an internal experience to hold it in my body, because if emotions are not safe to express, that leads me to a belief that I'm not safe, or that I'm too much, actually, and my emotions are too much. So bracing happens in a way to guard my internal experience from the external world. It's not the predator from the outside. It's actually
Mhm.
the internal state that I'm trying to protect. And so emotional dysregulation can occur through the bracing of the internal experience.
Yes, absolutely. I think so much of that deep bracing is like the deep intrinsic muscles of the core, the things that we use for expression, our vocal cords, our diaphragm, our ability to, yeah, emote, right? And so then if interoceptive signals, which we'll talk more about interoception throughout this season for sure as we dive into emotions. But if the sensations of your body are threatening, then your body is bracing against those sensations all of the time. And that is what we're talking about with trauma imprints. It's not just like a heightened startle reflex, it's that deep bracing that keeps us from self expression, or maybe even the pattern of disconnecting from those signals entirely, right? Like you move into dissociation really quickly even though now you're safe, that's the well-worn path. That's the pattern. And so that's really what trauma is. It's the imprint and the pattern that gets replayed, not the actual experience.
And both are boundaries,
Mhm.
right? Like parentification or emotional neglect. There's emotional experiences that are not just my emotions, but they're the felt sense of somebody else's emotions.
Yes. This isn't a term I love, but I want to talk a little bit about big T and little t trauma because trauma can take a lot of different forms. So it's important to understand the difference between what is often called big T and small t trauma. So big T trauma is usually referring to distinct catastrophic events, things like car accidents or natural disaster, assault, a major medical emergency. And these are events that most people think of when they hear the word trauma. They're big, they're obvious, and they're often easy to identify. But small t trauma is just as important, and it's definitely far more common. It's the subtle, repeated relational injuries we experience over time. A parent who was emotionally unavailable, a teacher who was constantly belittling you, microaggressions about your identity, or a constant sense of never feeling seen or accepted for who you are. These experiences seem small in isolation, but they can build up over time to shape our nervous system in really profound ways. And small t trauma can also be about what didn't happen, right? It can be the unmet needs for emotional attunement or safety or validation. It's that chronic, often invisible stress of not getting what you need to feel safe, to feel loved, connected, worthy. And just like big T trauma, these experiences leave imprints in the body, patterns of hypervigilance, shutdown, emotional disconnection that can shape your health, your relationships, your sense of self for your lifetime. And they all really impact our patterning.
Yeah. Let's talk about the types of trauma and how they shape our nervous systems. First, there's chronic trauma, the kind that builds up over time. This can be a long term stress of working in a high pressure job where you feel constantly on edge, living through a global pandemic, or a time of political upheaval with ongoing uncertainty, or enduring relational stress that never fully resolves. Chronic trauma doesn't necessarily come from one catastrophic event. It's the cumulative wear and tear of being in a heightened or dysregulated state for months, even years. This type of trauma can reshape the nervous system into a constant state of activation, making it hard to relax, to sleep, to feel safe, even when things calm down.
Then we have two important types of trauma that we talk about on the podcast a lot: complex and structural trauma. So let's dive into these a little bit more and how they impact the body, our beliefs, our behavior. So, starting with complex trauma, this is a relational wound at its core. We explored this a lot in season 3. So, complex trauma is a form of chronic trauma that is relational in nature, and it often develops in the context of relationships that are supposed to feel safe or supportive or nurturing. When we have caregivers or important figures that are inconsistent or neglectful or maybe even harmful, the nervous system learns to associate social connection, which we're wired to need, with a sense of threat. And that creates a constant unresolved stress load. Your system is really in a bind because you need relationships to survive, but they also feel dangerous. And that tension can show up in so many ways: an intense inner critic, toxic shame, perfectionism, social anxiety, emotional flashbacks, self abandonment. The nervous system is shaped by these early patterns, and it often stays in high alert, scanning for rejection, abandonment, harm, even in safe relationships. And that's why when we're working with the nervous system, it's so important to understand that we can't think our way out of these responses, but we can build capacity and safety with connection over time. We can build capacity to process stress and to expand our ability to be in relationship without it feeling so overwhelming. And we have a whole series on relational health and your nervous system. And we also have a CPTS series that looks at these distinguishing characteristics.
Yeah, because relational healing is essential. Relational healing is essential because our nervous system is wired for co regulation. We're meant to feel safe, to feel seen, to be supported in the presence of others. Healing from trauma isn't something we can do in isolation, it happens in relationship. When we feel safe, we have safe, attuned connections where we can be fully ourselves, seen, heard, and accepted without judgment. It teaches the nervous system that connection doesn't have to equal danger. We saw this in Anna's story, where her autoimmune symptoms, shaped by complex trauma, began to shift as she worked with her nervous system and developed a relationship that felt safe and supported. And in Luisa's episode, we saw how experiences of shame, chronic stress, and body pain shifted through nervous system work and safe relational experiences. Healing involves building capacity for vulnerability, to feel big emotions, express truth, and be witnessed without fear of rejection. It's not easy, but it's essential. Relational healing teaches the nervous system that connection can be safe. You can start small, with your pet, a plant, nature, a trusted practitioner. These can be nervous system training grounds for experiencing safe connection.
The other type of trauma that we do talk on here quite a bit about is structural trauma and the need for collective healing. So structural trauma is chronic, often invisible stress that comes from living in a world where systems of power, racism, sexism, body bias, homophobia, ableism shape how safe or unsafe your nervous system feels every day, day in, day out. And these systemic forces create a constant low-level sense of threat that the body responds to as real chronic danger. And that often leads to higher rates of chronic stress, pain, illness in communities that lack resources, social safety, face ongoing threat. And when we're healing our own nervous system, that is essential, but it's not enough to simply regulate in isolation. True healing requires both individual work to build capacity and resilience and collective action to change the systems that perpetuate harm, right? We have to hold both: the inner work of repatterning our nervous system and the outer work of dismantling the structures that create chronic stress in the first place.
Balancing individual and collective healing is essential. When we regulate our own nervous systems, we build the capacity to show up for collective work, whether that's in relationship, communities, or movements for change. A regulated system can handle the emotional intensity of advocacy, the discomfort of a hard conversation, express emotions of rage and of grief that go beyond the individual experience, and also have community to hold those experiences with, and the persistence required for social change. So healing just isn't an individual journey. Co-regulation, being in safe, attuned connection with others actually strengthens our nervous system's resilience. We're wired to co-regulate. It's in our biology. When we practice nervous system work together in community, we amplify each other's capacity, creating a feedback loop of safety, connection, and strength. This is how we build both personal and collective resilience, by learning how to move through the stress together.
Yeah, our nervous systems just don't operate in isolation. They're wired for connection. The term social synapse, introduced by neuroscientist Louise Cozolino, really describes how we are biologically designed to exchange signals. We do that through eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, touch. And that regulates our internal state. So every time you make eye contact or hear a soothing voice or receive a gentle touch, your nervous system is responding, it's adjusting, it's calibrating. And research shows that co-regulation, that process of feeling safe, seen, and supported in the presence of others, plays such a critical role in our health and in our resilience. And the studies have found that safe social connection actually lowers our cortisol levels, it reduces inflammation, it improves our heart rate variability, and even strengthens our immune function. And that all makes sense when we understand how nervous systems work. So the quality of our relationships is one of the strongest predictors of long-term health outcomes. Without co-regulation, our nervous system is more likely to stay in that chronic survival state, leading to burnout, leading to illness, leading to emotional disconnection. And that's why nervous system healing can't just happen alone. It happens in relationship, in community, through practices that help us rebuild connection and feel safe enough to expand our capacity.
And we've already started to talk about it, but let's dive into the importance of emotional processing.
So emotions aren't simply stored in the body. They are patterns of response created by the nervous system over time. Every emotion is a physiological event, a combination of internal sensations, brain activity, and then our body's responses that come from the reaction to the world around us. Our brain integrates signals from our body, like our heart rate, muscle tension, our breath, and then it constructs an emotional experience based on our past patterns and our predictions. And when we repeatedly experience certain states like fear or shame or anger, the nervous system can develop habitual emotional responses and then activate those patterns even in the absence of an actual current threat. And that's why emotional regulation isn't just about controlling our feelings or forcing calm, but about building capacity for the nervous system to respond and experience and process and recover from emotional activation without getting stuck. And research shows that improving interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense what's happening inside of our body, and then modulating our autonomic states in response to that is a really key component to reducing symptoms of anxiety, depression, chronic stress. This is exactly what we'll be exploring through season 5, the science of emotion, how they live in the body, how building capacity for emotional resilience and expression and regulation through applied neurology and somatic practices is possible and really needed for nervous system health.
If you would like to experience the tools that we talk about on every conversation of Trauma Rewired, please join us for 2 free weeks at rewiretrial.com.
We meet live and in community. There's also a huge on-demand library of classes with practices and neuro tools, and it's a place to really integrate the neurosomatic work that we do daily. So you can join us at rewiretrial.com.
Yeah, and let's touch on interoception because interoception is your body's internal listening system, the ability to sense, to feel, and interpret signals from within your heart rate, your breath, your muscle tension, digestion, even the flutter in your stomach before a big event. It's the nervous system's way of gathering real time information about what's happening inside your body and using that data to shape your experiences of the world. Interoception is a foundational piece of emotional processing because emotions aren't just ideas in the mind. They are physiological events that arise from the brain's interpretation of interoceptive signals. When the nervous system is dysregulated, it often distorts or blunts these signals, leaving you either overwhelmed by emotions or cut off from them entirely. Building interoceptive awareness through practices like respiration training, movement, and sensory drills help create a more accurate map of what's happening inside, allowing you to respond rather than to react. It's not just about feeling more, it's about developing the capacity to sense, process, and move through emotional states with resilience. This is why interoception is a key focus in the nervous system work. It connects the body's signals to the brain's interpretations, shaping not only how we feel physically, but how we navigate the world emotionally. We will dive into this a lot more as we move through this season.
Yeah, this is going to be a big topic for this season, interoception. So, kind of a quick overview of emotional processing. Your nervous system processes emotions through a complex interplay between the body's signals, the brain's interpretation, and then our behavior. So, it all starts, like everything else, with that sensory input, the information coming in from both the external world, like sights, sounds, social cues, and the internal world, your heart rate, your breath, your muscle tension. And the internal input is again known as interoception. And again, that's really critical for our emotional processing because our brain doesn't just detect emotions, it actually constructs them from these sensations. So, according to research by Lisa Feldman Barrett, the constructed theory of emotions, the brain creates emotional experiences by interpreting our interoceptive signals, and then it puts that together with the context of past experiences and also our current context. And then it predicts what is going to happen. In other words, our brain is constantly asking, what do these signals mean? Have I felt this before? What should I do about it now? For example, if you have a racing heart or sweaty palms, that might mean excitement in one situation, like before doing this podcast, or it might mean anxiety in another situation, right? The brain is making a prediction based on context and based on prediction from your past emotional experiences. So that whole process is happening in many networks of your brain, like your insular cortex, which helps you process those interoceptive signals, in the anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in attention and emotional regulation, the amygdala, which is tagging stimulus as threatening or safe, and the prefrontal cortex, which integrates that information for decision making and meaning making. So when we talk about emotions as body-based events, we're talking about this constant loop. The brain or the body sends a signal, the brain interprets it, you experience an emotion, your emotion shapes your behavior and your other physical outputs, and then those become the inputs that your brain is now responding to. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, like say you're stuck in a chronic fight, flight, or freeze state, it can distort the whole process, leading to exaggerated emotional responses or misinterpretations of safety and danger, and even emotional numbness.
If emotions aren't felt and processed, they don't just go away. They keep activating the nervous system, contributing to chronic dysregulation. Emotional repression, ignoring, numbing, or avoiding feelings, creates unresolved stress that builds over time, leading to symptoms like chronic tension, anxiety, shutdown, and even illness. Modulation, the ability to move between activation and rest, depends on the capacity to process emotions. When you can feel an emotion, fully process it somatically, and return to safety, your nervous system learns it's safe to feel. I can handle this. This is why emotional processing is not a luxury or an add-on. It's essential, necessary skill for regulation, resilience, and long-term health. Emotional health is nervous system health. This is a big topic, and we'll be diving deep into it and throughout season 5, unpacking how emotions are built in the body and the brain, why trauma impacts the process, and how we can use neurosomatic tools to create the capacity for change.
So, to recap a little for folks, your nervous system is your body's operating system. It's the network of nerves, brain, the spinal cord that takes in information about the world, like sights, sounds, sensations. It interprets that and then it tells your body how to respond. It runs everything from your heart rate, your breath, your digestion, your emotions, even how you think, right? Our thoughts are influenced by these states that are in our body. And most of it is happening below your conscious awareness. Your nervous system is constantly scanning your environment for safety or threat, using all of your past experiences and the current context to make predictions, and it's designed for survival. If it senses danger, it prepares you to fight, to flee, to freeze, to fawn, to flop, to keep you alive. We have a series coming down the line for all 4 Fs.
Trauma isn't just a memory or a story from the past. It's a pattern of protective responses stored in your nervous system. It's how your body and brain learn to adapt to overwhelming or threatening situations. And it often shows up as a recurring reaction: a racing heart, tension, shallow breath, dissociation, even when the event is long over. The body remembers through sensations, reflexes, and survival patterns, what Pierre Genet called automatic actions and attitudes. This is why you can feel anxious or safe in a room or shut down in a moment that seems fine to your thinking brain. Healing the nervous system means working directly with these patterns in the body, building awareness, capacity, and the ability to feel and process emotions safely so you can shift out of survival responses and into resilience. That's the heart of the nervous system work, and we'll explore throughout the season of Trauma Rewired to examine emotions, embodiment, and post-traumatic growth on an individual and collective level. Make sure you hit subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you want to start learning to work with your nervous system to repattern, join us at rewiretrial.com for 2 free weeks of neurosomatic training.